Okay, thank you all. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, this is good. It's a pleasure and honor being here and kicking this day off. I'm occasionally here in Norway, and I'll start with a small story just to warm you up here. And I'm based out of Copenhagen, and you know, when I need to go to Oslo, I typically fly. A few months back, when I was sitting in the plane, we were about to take off. And you know, the plane would start accelerating on the runway. Just before getting to the max speed, the brakes would suddenly hit. And we were sitting, you know, with our, heart in our throats, saying, what's going on? And then, you know, the captain with a very calm voice said, don't worry, this is not normal, but one of our subsystems did not, respond in time, and our computer actually automatically shut down, activates the brakes. Saying, wow, this is safe, fail-safe mechanism, it's working, I'm in good hands. So the only thing is, the captain says, the only problem is we cannot deactivate the brakes, once this has happened, so we need to go back to the gate. So we go back to the gate, and we're sitting there, and he says, I need to call a technician, and then this expert comes. I'm thinking, okay, this is very interesting. Now I'll see the real expert in action. And he starts doing a lot of stuff, he has some equipment, then after a few minutes, he says, I'm going to take the power off for a while, and then I'll power it on again. And I was looking at the other IT guy next to me. I'm thinking, okay, this expert is actually doing a reboot for the plane. So that was his answer of solving the IT problem. So this links to a topic that I'm going to describe a bit later. By the way, it didn't work. So we had actually to evacuate the plane and get another one. Anyway, that's a different story. Okay, so my story today is about social mobility analytics in cloud, SMAC. This is, of course, changing the way we communicate, the way we interact. It's changing the business. And my talk today is going to take a step back and look at, first of all, from an IT and business point of view, and then the testing afterwards. So I'm going to take the liberty of have a different angle on it, and then we can put the testing spin on top of that. Now, the work that I'm going to give today, or my speech, is based on some of the work that has been done by my colleagues, much smarter than myself. They've actually also written a book on that. It's called Code Halos, How the Digital Lives of People, Things, and Organizations Are Changing the Rules of Business. You can get it, of course, in the bookstore, but you can also download, being SMAC, you can also download it on your mobile for free, actually, in your Google App Store or your iPhone. Okay, just starting, of course, with some reflections on the past decade. You probably also have experienced this in Norway to a certain extent. By the way, I'm from Cognizant. Just a bit commercial for my company. I don't want to bore you with all the details. Come and visit our booth and you can get all the details about all the wonderful services we can provide. So no worries about that. It has been an era of great head scratching. We had some of our leaders thinking, what is going on, what is happening. And obviously in Norway, you were not exposed to a certain degree as to the bigger other economies, but nevertheless, we also have some things cropping up in Norway. Now, what is puzzling is the fact that we see the digital transformation changing the way bringing new products to the market, and this is changing. It is a disruptive business model. What do I mean by that? Now, imagine you be in the board of directors of Kodak 10 years back. And someone will tell you that in 10 years' time, people are taking 15 more pictures, 15 times more pictures than they're doing today. Will you be happy or sad? Imagine if you were managing a bookstore and someone will tell you, well, bookstores will increase by 25%. Could that be a good news or bad news? Well, what happened is Kodak is now bankrupt. The Kodak moment is gone. Many newspapers in the US and Europe, and I think also to a certain extent in the Norges, are now also coming out once a week or totally gone. Blockbuster, we used to rent our videos there, is out of business. I think it's only in Denmark they're staying alive for some reason. And Borders, one of the biggest bookstores, is also gone. So what has happened? So basically the idea is that something has gone wrong. And this is basically the shift in technology has happened too slow in these companies. They're simply too slow adapting new technologies. And this has happened, you've seen it with normal phones, with newspapers, with record companies and so forth. And it will keep continue. Just think of the recent Uber coming up. Yeah? Now all taxi drivers feel threatened. Sometimes these threats coming up from new different sources. Banks are in threat at the moment. Why? Because do you really need a bank if people have all their payment possibilities through other channels? One of the analysts in the US, for example, discovered that one of the biggest banks, or the mid-sized bank in the US, was Starbucks. Why? People actually are using their cards, putting money on the cards, and someone did a calculation of how much money is on the card. It actually was equivalent to a medium-sized bank. So this keeps repeating. So basically, it was the shift from the so-called, widgets or bricks to clicks or digits. Whereas basically, as a clause, this, a merge of new type of businesses, new types of companies. So basically, this is transforming the way we do business. This is transforming our lives. It's the way we interact. Now, my daughter, for example, she got her mobile phone when she was 9 years old. And she was calling me all the time, which was quite a nice thing. Never called her mother. And, I was quite proud, and she was, all the time, "Hi, Dad, how are things going?" And once I was sitting together with my wife at the dinner table, and my wife says, "Why don't you call me? You can't call me." And she says, "That's because you work, Mom." Now, to my defense, my wife's a nurse. She works in intensive care, so she's practically saving lives. I'm doing this. And in a child's mind, there's a big difference in the urgency and gravity of these two things. So what is happening is basically that our businesses and our I would say, if we take a step back, look at organizations, are going away from these siloed, monolithic entities into something that is distributed. We see this on our systems and our software, but this is also happening to the logical entities. And these can be spread across different geographies, different, different groups, different businesses, and different organizations. This is also happening to testing. I'll get back to this. This is all based on a social SMAC. Social computing being one element, mobility, advanced analytics, and cloud, which is basically the fabric putting the whole thing together. And it's actually the multitude of all things that is generating this effect. Just think of how you used to communicate. I have, for example, my own experience. I only remember the telephone numbers of the people before the mobile got my first mobile. Today I don't remember those. So this is changing, in consciously the way we use technology and the way it affects our lives. This picture is taking the same place actually. This actually was a very known event. Maybe some of you can guess. This is taken at the Vatican. This is what, with the election of the previous Pope, Benedict XVI, 17, yeah, that range, plus minus. This one was taken for the election of the latest Pope Francis. And you see the technology intake comparison in these two pictures. This is amazing. I've always found it interesting that people are so busy documenting they're a certain place instead of just being there, but that's a different discussion. An unknown statement by Bill Gates that we will always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10 years. There's only 8 years here we're discussing. Okay. So analyzing this, basically if we take a step back, there has been a number of technology shift throughout the years. The first one was going from mainframe to mini computers, which happened, going from 60s to 70s. Again, you had one going from mini computers to PCs, from PCs to desktop internet to mobile internet. And you see at the same time an explosion of devices. I know there are some talks also around the Internet of Things. And I was thinking it can't be true. 10 billion devices, I mean, we're only 7 billion people, and not all of us have access to devices, mobile devices, computers. But I just did, a quick calculation. You can do this yourself. Just looking how many computers do you have at home. So, okay, I have one laptop, my wife has one, my daughter has, but I also have one on my mobile. And actually, my fridge also has a computer. I don't know what it does, but it has a computer. My car also has a computer. I started putting these two things, all these things together. I thought, maybe it's true. 10 billion devices, and it's only exploding. So what is happening is, of course, that some companies, you have series of S-curves. And we are here. And typically testing, I'll get back to that, we are a bit delayed, of course, because it's, like it or not, we are not the one causing the technology shift, we are adapting to it. So typically there's a delay of 5 to 10 years from a testing point of view. So what I'm predicting is that basically we're just seeing this, the top of the iceberg, we're just scratching the surface. So from a testing point of view, we're just starting the whole transition. So the idea is, as mentioned, we have a number of S-curves, and now actually we're seeing the flattening out of the previous S-curve and the emergence of the new one. At the same time, we see an explosion of data. I think some analysts did some calculation that the data will increase by the magnitude of 50 times, but IT professionals only increase by 1.5 times. So it means that we will have much more data to manage. Just think about the test data management that we need to do in the future. We've already seen the beginning of that. So what's the whole thing about the data? What's amazing is that 90% of all the data that has been in the world today has been created in the last 2 years, which is amazing, isn't it? Last 2 years, and this keeps exploding. And if you look daily or monthly, IP traffic is equivalent to 83.8 exabytes. I'm not a smart guy, so for me, exabyte is, it's like when we read, Donald Darkin was fantasy. It's a bit, similar to me. I don't know, it's 1 with 18 zeros. Now, some of the scientists did calculation that if you take all the spoken words of humankind through history, it will give you about 5 exabytes. And it's about, 50,000 years worth of DVD quality video coming each month. So what does it mean? What the new companies that you saw before have realized is that the new oil is in the data. Let me give you an example. This is the one that is creating new opportunities, new businesses. In Cognizant, we call that code halo. Basically, this is the digital footprint that you leave whenever you like something, you purchase something, you search something, you're leaving a trace out there in cyberspace. And this is creating a so-called code halo. I don't know if you've had this experience when, for example, you go to Netflix, you put in these 3 videos, for example, that you want to see, and they come up with these pretty good suggestions and say, how did you know? I want to put those 3 choices, and they know pretty much what I need. Same with Spotify. This is because they're good in analyzing the code halo thing. The idea is, of course, that these companies will piece together the information that you have based on the choices that you make, on the searches and the data that you leave out there. And this is creating the new business models for these companies. Just think about it. Do you think that people, just by looking at your playlist, can tell something about you? Think so? Guess what? This is taken from the US. If you have Garth Brooks as your favorite artist, what do you think you vote? Republican. That's about 90% certainty. If you have Madonna as your favorite artist, you vote Democrat, okay? But sometimes it might not be that obvious. Let me give another example. Any Justin Timberlake fans here? Okay? There's a big chance, if you're a Justin Timberlake fan, you also like Pixar films. Okay? Another one. Any Jimi Hendrix fans? Okay. If you like Jimi Hendrix, most likely you also like science fiction movies. There's some generalization. Some other examples. Just by looking at your players, people can deduct whether you're in a relationship, whether you're married, whether you're divorced, whether you're planning to get divorced, just by looking at your recent listening. They can tell about your age. Most of the people, for example, including myself, we our preferences between the age of 15 to 25. we typically go back, and so I always go back and put on my 80s and 90s, new music and listen to that. And people stick to that. They can know about your family background, whether you're coming from the countryside, the suburbs, or very urban, type of family, just by looking at your music taste. It can also tell something about your income and intelligence, believe it or not. So based on your music taste, people can know whether you're a customer that, potential customer for a certain product. There are some, there's actually a website, maybe you can look it up, it's called Music That Makes You Dumb. Basically what they've done is they've analyzed the preferences of different people and where they've studied, and they looked at the average score of this particular university. And based on that, we were able to come up with this chart. Now, my daughter is now a teenager, and I was passing by her room, and to my horror, I heard that she was listening to Beyonce. I was looked up here, Beyonce. So I rushed into my stack of records, took a collection of U2 and Bob Dylan, and I ran in and put it on her table. I said, "This is for your future, dear. Just listen to this." And she just, looked at me with her very tired teenage eyes and told me, "Records, this is so last millennium. I don't even have a record player." Okay. Now the point is, this is getting amplified even further. Just think about your wearables. I have this sort of device that we count how many steps I will take, how many calories I consume, and so forth. Now think of all the other data that are being pieced together. Now my car, for example, I have a Volvo. My car is connected to the internet. So basically I can sit from home and I can turn on the heating in the car. Now, if you think about it, my car has my playlist, it has a GPS system, it knows where I'm going. Actually, it has a computer option that reads how fast I'm going, how I'm treating the brakes, and so forth. It also reminds me that my car is due for service. But I'm just thinking, if Volvo will launch an insurance product, they'll pretty much be very, accurate in coming up with an insurance product that will fit exactly my needs. This is what is happening from an IT perspective. It's knowing about, the end-to-end user needs and preferences. Okay, so how is this affecting testing and QA? The main difference is basically that we now, instead of looking at conforming requirements, as we did in the old days, we're looking at governing the end-to-end user experience. And it's not only experience with using the software, but it's also getting the software, making sure that your user also recommends the software. They are keeping basically the entire life cycle, the ecosystems of using the software intact. And making sure that the data that is being passed by the different entities your app is connected to is being secure, is performing to the right level, and so forth. You've probably seen that Maslow hierarchy of needs. Basically that, Maslow did an analysis of what motivates people, and he discovered there are different layers. Obviously, the basic layer is, of course, making sure that you have water and food, and just stable survival. On top of that, there are different layers. Safety layer, esteem, belongings, and so forth, and self-actualization. Obviously, we're not going to self-actualization yet, the other needs are not fulfilled. A new version, of course, is that you will have Wi-Fi at the bottom. But from a testing point of view, and I think there are a few versions out there, the SMAC is creating a new pyramid, which is changing a bit our focus. We used to focus a lot on the functionality, but what's becoming evident is now that deployability, our ability to get the software, install it, is becoming, the first thing you need to test. Why? Well, you might have the best features in the world. If people are not able to get the software, install it, you will not get that far. Functionality is, of course, still there. You still have, good features, good functions that need to perform adequately, have good capabilities. You have also interoperability. Your device, your app is connected to other devices. You're connected to YouTube, you're connected to Facebook, you're connected to devices and so forth. So this is the chain, this is a new challenge that's coming up. Non-functional aspects, security being the biggest one. The fact that everything's connected also means that there are people will possibly exploit that to their benefits. I don't know if you've seen I would have shown you the video on the hackers hacking a connected car and controlling it, on the motorway. You can look it up on YouTube. Impressive stuff. They're sitting, 1 kilometer away and controlling a car, controlling the brakes and controlling the heating system and so forth. Scary stuff. Imagine if you can do that to a plane. Also seen the security breaches, Snapchat of the, images have gone viral of, people thought that, oh, it will just disappear in 2 seconds. Guess what? Someone is storing that in a server. And ultimately, of course, usefulness. Is it useful enough? Is it making our lives easier? Am I getting a happier person by using the software? Am I happy enough to like it and review it and cause others to download the software, feeding back to the first bottom of the pyramid? And I like actually, I've looked, this is an old definition, but I found it quite interesting that it's still valid from a usability or usefulness point of view. Basically, it's the effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction with a specified set of users can achieve a specified set of tasks in a particular environment. Let's go back to 1998. By the way, there are a few other people who have written similar pyramids, so you can try to look up also some of the work that Goiko has done and Chris Ambler, and I think Jan Jaap has also done some work on that area. So one of the new things that is coming into action is so-called social listening. Have you heard about this? Basically, there are some techniques, some tools out there that will enable you to tap into that information. We did an analysis for a company, for a Swedish car company. They wanted actually to analyze what are consumers saying about the products, how is it compared to, how many tweets are there out there, what is the impression of people about their products, how does it compare to our competitors. Social listening is a mechanism that's coming in that will enable you to get that information, to extract it. Analytics. In the old days, I'll say no, we're still doing that. We used to play a game of Chinese whispers. You know the game? Basically, I will whisper you something in your ear, you will whisper to her ear and so forth, and at the end I would probably not recognize the original statement. We used to do that in school as kids. Over time we've done that with requirements. We have someone who will make some guesses about what the customer wants. They'll whisper in the ears of a lead architect who will then do the same thing, or a lead developer who will do the same thing, and at the end it will come to testing, and then is it the same thing that we originally intended to do? The point is, with through analytics, you can get it directly from the source. In Danish, I don't know if you had the same statement in Norwegian, but we have a statement saying that you should hear the truth from drunk people and children. Yeah? So ultimately, drunk children would be the ultimate truth. No, but what I'm saying is that here you have this gives you an opportunity of bypassing all these layers and going directly to the customer. And you can use this for identifying, for example, new requirements, new needs that you didn't think were there. You can easily discover areas that you need to focus your testing on. My typical starting point would be creating a test strategy, a risk analysis, where I identify where this risk, based on what is the impact, what's the likelihood of things happening, and based on that, I create a test strategy. Now, sometimes, believe it or not, the reality doesn't relate to my risk analysis. So something new will pop up. Through analytics, you're able to revise your test strategy based on input from the users from the market. You can this way also optimize your test coverage to go in certain areas. Probably how many devices do you need to cover. Why guess? You get the information right there from the customers. So basically it's about tapping into a user's code halo. All the detail, all the data that's being left out there, getting the insight from there directly and basing your strategy out of that. So what kind of, there are multiple techniques and areas. I will select a few of them. How much do you have? Okay, perfect. Okay, let me select a few things that might be new for some of you guys. Functional testing, as I see it, of course, is diminishing. Why? because you can actually let some of the testing be done by your end users. And some years back, this would be unimaginable. You know, I used to remember, you know, from my previous work, you said, you never test in production. I think, why? Production, this is a real life environment. You know, sometimes we make a simplification, we make models, we do the testing on the models, but ultimately, production will be the real life. So, there are a few techniques out there. I'll just, you know, describe a few of them. One of them is called hallway testing, for example, and this is about the concept is that you have a hallway and people are passing in random, and you just select a few of those in the hallway. Another technique is called A/B or multivariate. Let me dig into that. Here it is. Okay. Basically, the idea behind that is if you have a new application and you have your user community, what you do is you send out two versions simultaneously to your user group. So half of you, for example, would be using one version. The other half would be using another version of the application simultaneously. So basically, you cluster your application, send out two versions, and you introduce a number of new features. And based on the response of the people, are they able to use it? Are they able to use it efficiently? Can they find the new features? You can then afterwards make a decision whether it's version A or B you want to go ahead with. Now, another version of that is called multivariate, which is basically a technique where you vary a number of things, and then statistically, using statistic method, you take the one that is most efficient. There are some companies using that to a large scale, basically, and they're using it where they're actually using you as testers even without letting you know. I mean, the old days, you probably say, you know, get an invitation, you want to be a beta tester of this new version. And you say, yes, I want to be this, I want to do this. Now, actually, they're not even asking you. You're part of this experiment. Gamification. You've probably seen this. There's a contest. What is your favorite color? Hey, I know the answer. It's blue. And you're doing that. You're actually doing performance testing for that application. Yeah? It's a nice way of actually shifting the load to your end users. And the way actually they control it is by so-called RAM deployment. What do I mean by that? We're doing some testing for eBay and LinkedIn, which we use this technique. And basically the idea is that instead of splitting your user community into two clusters, what you do is you identify a smaller group of people, which either can be selected randomly or a certain geography, or a certain user group, and you launch these features just for that group. You monitor the use, you learn. If it's good enough, then you increase to a bigger group, and so forth. If it doesn't work, you roll back. So at a certain point in time, I was remembering I was logging onto LinkedIn. My graphical user interface was different than my colleagues because both of us we are different parts of this cluster. What's happening here? Okay. Other techniques. Obviously, the whole non-functional aspects, as mentioned, are becoming extremely important. And yesterday at dinner, we were discussing accessibility as another example. You have now, Norwegian legislation that would say people with visually impairment need to be able to operate the systems. So these are, either by law or by the fact that people are using across different geos, with different needs, is becoming a necessity. One area that might be new for many of you is monkey testing. Monkey testing, one of my favorite topics. I used to speak on those topic years back. I came from the embedded system world, and at the time I was testing medical devices, and we used monkey testing, an automated random monkey test just to make sure that the software is resilient. So for us, the whole idea was to see how much does it take to break it down, and if it breaks down, does it recover gracefully because it's a medical device. And I thought, the era of monkey testing has gone. And the whole concept is basically that, you have like a list of different actions, and you have basically an automation tool. And it will automatically just select something in random from that list and execute it on the application on the test and monitor the behavior of the application. At the same time, of course, it will create a log that will enable you to play it back in case your system crash. You can just play it back and you repeat the actions. Now, the idea was to measure the reliability. This is coming back now in a new series of tools that are there to test the reliability of the infrastructure. Netflix had, for example, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years back, they had a major blackout period, basically, where their servers were down and it caused them loss of millions of dollars. After that episode, they wanted to change the strategy in terms of how to test the resilience. So they launched a so-called Simian army. And the idea of the Simian army is that it would go out and simulate different attacks on the infrastructure. And the whole idea is to see if it's, you have the recover mechanism functioning correctly. They've created subsequently a number of different monkeys. They have, I think Kong was a security monkey, and they have another one which was the performance monkey. But the whole idea is to introduce some randomness into the way we do testing. Now, I typically, the analogy that I use is, imagine this is a minefield. Okay? I know it's a gloomy picture. And imagine that I want to get through this minefield. What is the best way for me to get through the minefield with it without getting blown to pieces? Any suggestions? Sorry? Throw something at it? Or maybe I can let someone else volunteer go through it. So any volunteers, 100 kronas, go through the minefield. And if this person will go through the whole thing, I will just walk in this person's footsteps. Yeah? And the idea is, of course, that the chances of me hitting the same mine will be much smaller unless someone during the night has shifted away the mines. It will not happen. Now, what we're doing in regression testing, for example, is we're taking the same route through this minefield day after day after day. Yeah? So we're not discovering new issues unless some changes have happened. And I'm not, of course, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of regression testing, keep doing regression testing. What I'm saying is that there's an element of randomness, of dynamicness that is not there. And the whole idea behind these test monkeys is to introduce this dynamicness and this randomness into the whole thing. Okay. Actually, I have each one of these is a complete talk, so maybe we can do the entire day or go through the different topics. But in the interest of time, I will just try to wrap up. We have 10 minutes. Basically, as mentioned, we're here. I've tried to look at what has happened from a testing point of view over the years, and Duran's quality control book, first version came out in 1951. We had the first mention of the waterfall model in 1970, which is quite late, isn't it? The first book on testing, or at least the one that mentioned the testing the title, Out of Software Testing, came in 79, which was basically a reaction actually to the whole mainframe thing. So basically in testing we're, as mentioned, about 10 years late into the game. And a couple of new concepts coming out, for example, the Agile Manifesto 2001, which was, around here, basically at the end of the PC era, but basically was a reaction to go from mini computer to PC. Crowdsourcing, which is quite new, and weekend testing came, in the last 5 to 10 years. I believe from a testing point of view here, we're just about, the whole thing is about to explode. And like it or not, you'll be a part of the new digital testing era. There are two ways of course, handling this challenge. One way is just saying, well, this effect will not affect me. We've seen it come in the past. It will come and go like fashion, so I'm good. Or I'll just ignore it. Someone else, gets the first experience with. Another way would be embracing the opportunities this brings. As mentioned before, I believe that the role of the functional tester will change. We'll be seeing an increase of what we call shift left. Basically, the whole thing is about business assurance, closer to business, monitoring user experience, user advocacy. Shift left, we already, probably you've already done that, and it will continue. It's about being involved early in the cycle, in requirement analysis, static analysis, performance engineering. This will continue. What's new is the whole shift right. You probably heard about DevOps. Some of them even you doing DevOps, but the idea is also to link testing to operations, to have this continuous integration, continuous delivery, and software being pushed into production and have the entire cycle in a constant, quality assured, tested fashion. So we have these streams of software getting into production all the time. This, of course, new, and many of us will need to get some skills that perhaps didn't have in the past. At the same time, we also see that we have the shift down or go deeper, in the sense test-driven development, closer relationship to developers. We're already seeing some of the communities, agile communities, saying, well, we don't need testers anymore because we are using cross-functional teams where testing is embedded as a part of the team. So what does it mean? You have shift off, shift down, shift right, shift left. Does it mean that we are shifting out as testers? I don't think so. I just think that we are redefining our profession. And in order to remain relevant and remain in job, I think you should look at, picking some of these skills that are in these areas. I'm not saying you should start coding, but at least, for example, getting some basic concepts about programming, about system thinking, that will enable you to have meaningful discussions with your developers. Domain skills, knowing what your user wants, either by using the tools like social listening, or by yourself putting yourself in the shoes of the user. Testing as a service, and here that we've just seen where we've just seen the top of the iceberg. Now it's becoming a lot of companies are going away from the so-called CapEx model, where you upfront to invest in tools and infrastructure and everything, and going to the OpEx, which is more operational expenses. And this is also happening in testing. Let me give you a couple of examples. Performance testing. In the old days, you would invest in a performance tool, install it in-house, and have a number of people operating you and servicing the different departments requiring performance testing. What becomes evident is that, why do I need a performance testing tool if I'm only using it like 3 to 4 times a year? And what do I do with all the people that that are using their time managing the tool and doing the testing? Cognizant, for example, we see a lot of requests in, hey, we don't want just the people doing the work. We want the service. We want the service, including the tools, including the licenses, as a part of our, and we want it on demand. And you see this growing. And if you think about it, this can be done for all the domain agnostic services. I mean, I don't need to be an expert in your application, in the business behind your application, to do performance test or a security test of your application. I just need to know how to navigate. Of course, this information I get from you, but otherwise, I don't need the other things. Another again, speaking from experience, we had this. We wanted to do an automation of a website on different platforms. And in the old days, I knew that if I needed to get different environments, I'll need to fill in this form. I need 4 machines. I need a Windows machine. I need a server. And I need this operating system. And then I'll send it for approval. And then 3-4 weeks later, someone will approve it and send it for approval for his manager. And someone then will order the equipment. And 3 months later, I'll be having the computers that I want with the installation. I found out, oh, actually, it was the wrong computer. I sent it back, and you've probably been there. A couple of weeks back, we did some work for one of our customers. We went into Test Chameleon. I don't know if you know this website. Test Chameleon, German company. You can order as many environments as you want on demand. So we ordered 5 environments, including the different variations of the browsers. And the smart thing is, they even have the Selenium components on these machines that will enable you, from your machine, to deploy all your automation scripts to all these environments. This is fantastic. This is something that 10 years back was almost impossible. And you'll probably also see an increase in the whole crowdsourcing thing. Obviously, you have a crowd out there, and one of the main ways of using testing basically applications that are intended for crowds is using the crowd. So my point is, the best way of testing the SMAC is using the SMAC. So it's all about putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, getting closer to the customer. And obviously, we did discuss a lot about the new business opportunities. Obviously, as testers, we also need to be aware of the dark side of the whole code halo. Basically all the security breaches, the privacy data, and so forth. So I would say another opportunity for us as testers is to move into these areas. So if you look at what's happening in terms of transformation, first thing is, of course, we're going away from finding defects to identifying patterns, basically by monitoring the users. We're going away from activities to platform. Again, testers, we were using from one of our customers, they actually removed the term tester from their company. They call it quality engineers, they call it something else, using user advocates, but not testers anymore. Hardware-bound environments, where you have only the physical, you're constrained by the physical environment, to virtualized environments. Service virtualization, another example. You can actually test your application that is connected to a number of other applications without actually having the other applications ready. You can just stop them and virtualize them. And at the end, it's about having a holistic quality view, as we discussed. So in summary, I would say that our terrain is changing, and the key is, of course, to adapt. And we can either, of course, just hope that the whole thing will just go away, which absolutely will not happen, or we can just look at this as new opportunity for us to become the new digital testers. Thank you very much.